Well, good morning or good afternoon, whatever it is you're watching this. It's time for Ask the Pastor again. And today's question is a really good one. Comes from Joanne Neal, who's down in Florida, soaking up all them rays while we're up here freezing. And it has to do with communion and why do we do communion one time a month on the first week of the month versus other denominations like the Catholic Church that does communion every week and actually every day when they do have communion, and other denominations why they do it that way. And so, the basis of all of this is the focal point of the service. So let's look at it this way. For the Catholic Church, the focal point of their service is the communion element. It is that moment when they believe that the host and the wine or the juice or whatever they're using turns into the actual body and blood of Christ. This is their focal point. This is what the entire service is building up into the taking of this sacrament. And it makes sense for them because their theology is built on sacraments. So baptism, first communion, marriage or holy orders, communion, last rites, and those sorts of things, those whatever all the other ones are as well. So their sacraments are the most important part of their theology, and communion being one of the sacraments, it is the most important part of the service. That's why, as Protestants, we're not allowed to take communion at a Catholic church because we're not members of the church, and in their idea, we're not officially taking a part in the body and the blood of Christ. And I know that seems ridiculous and kind of whatever type theology, but that's the point of it. They believe that this sacrament is a saving sacrament that works within their theology. For most Protestant churches, while we do believe that the sacrament of Holy Communion is sacred and holy and all that stuff, it's really not the focal point of our service. The focal point of the Protestant churches, most of them, is the sermon. Unfortunately, you guys don't get a lot of good ones, so sorry about that. But you know what I mean. The focal point of our service is the sermon, and the rest of it is a response to the sermon. That's why I do the sermon towards the beginning, because the offering is a response, the communion is a response, and all those things that happen afterwards, the announcements are a response to the sermon. So it depends on what your focal point is theologically. And again, for us as United Methodists, I do know United Methodist churches that do communion every week. Personally, I'm good with that. I would be okay with doing communion more often. I think it's important for us, and I think it grounds us in our faith. I know United Methodist churches that do communion once a quarter. I know other denominational churches that do communion once a year or twice a year. So the idea kind of behind those types of thinking is that if you do it too often, it doesn't make it as special and as meaningful as if you were to take it every week. And that's the rationale that I hear. I don't necessarily think that's right, wrong, or indifferent. One of my first churches I was at, London and Azalea United Methodist churches, way back when I was in seminary, we did communion during Lent every week for the 4 years I was there. And that was just kind of special to do it out of the ordinary rhythm of our church services, but just to do communion every week. They thought it was pretty neat. I thought it was pretty neat. But again, it boils down to where we stand theologically on communion. For the Catholic Church, it's the sacrament that you can partake in every single day. For United Methodists, it is very important, and it is all that is holy in our lives, but we tend to focus more on the spoken word than on the sacraments. So that's really why each church, each United Methodist church, it's up to them when and how they want to celebrate the sacrament of Holy Communion. We do it. I remember when I first got here, my first communion Sunday, I was kind of freaking out because you guys did it very differently than what I was used to. Not only did you have the intinction, but you would rip the bread and dip it in a cup. And then there was the other elements on the side, the gluten-free option, and the cut up pieces and all that, and I wasn't used to that. Church I was at previous to this one, we did the one loaf in the cup, and I handed the bread, which is what I do now because that's what I like. I think it's important that you are receiving the body of blood of Christ and not just taking the body of blood of Christ. That's just a little theological thing in my crazy little mind. But it's different from each churches. There's the United Methodist churches that still take communion at a communion rail. There's United Methodist churches that hand out the communion to everybody, and they go and sit down and they have a little cup of the juice and the bread, and they all take the bread together and they all take the juice together. So it's in different formats and different ways. There's no right or wrong in this. It's just what each church tradition is. So I hope that answers your question, Joanne. Send us some of that sunshine. We could really use it, although it's like 50 degrees today. Tomorrow's supposed to be 20 and a snowstorm downstate. So we do miss you, Joanne. Hope you're doing well. If you have any more questions, please feel free to email them to me at the church. Everybody have a blessed day.